Ladies and gentlemen, I almost feel like I'm doing that introduction of a boxing fight. You know, they go, let's get ready. Yeah, let's get ready to get some knowledge tonight. Me and my co host, brother Azar Muhammad, we have been in the works at least a month on this, man, trying to get our scholar, our OG, brilliant brother. Phone lines are open, messengers open. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how to give an introduction to be worthy enough, but me and my co-host are honored to have brother Rashied Bey. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm good by Allah's grace. I have no complaints, no complaints at all.
That is great to hear, my brother. Azar Muhammad, what do you think, brother? How were we blessed to get our brother in here?
Hey, you do what you do. You do what you do, brother. I'm glad you came through with it. I can't wait to ask these brothers about 1,000 questions I got in my head.
We were back in the back studio, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, and we're actually been on time. This is a blessing. Time is of the essence. The brother was and I were chatting, and he gave us the approval and the word that there's no subject that we cannot cover, we cannot address. First of all, to give the people a history of who you are, can you bring us back to? Can you give us a few words about yourself first, and then after that, I'd like you just to dive into your introduction and to maybe knowledge of self, please, sir.
Okay. I was born and raised in New York City, Brooklyn, Brownsville, East New York, uh, eastern part of Bedford Stuyvesant. I ran the streets a little bit, studied with the Nation of Gods and Earths in my mid-teens, signed my processing letter to ask for my ex when I was about 17 in my senior year of high school. And over the course of the years, I've been admitted to a Sufi in Tariqa. I got the X, I got the name, became a Freemason, uh, and was admitted to that society for further study. And, father, one of the greatest roles I've ever been blessed to play and hopefully to do a satisfactory performance. Um, Husband, I've taught sociology for the State University of New York and a few other schools. Uh, Served some time with the Navy, and I taught while I was there. I mean, we could go on and on with just. I'm still traveling paths and highways and byways, trying to learn who I am. So
Brother, listen, it's already, I'm telling you right now, my chiming is going crazy. So, Teresa Thomas, good evening. Thank you, sister, for please make public so I can share the stream. Okay, this stream is actually from a private page, so it's a group page, but feel free to watch and comment. Azar Muhammad, you asked the brother in the studio about his entering into the Nation of Islam. I know we're gonna jump around a little bit, but Azar, ask him that question again, please.
You said that you grew up in Brownsville and you ran the streets. So I guess you did what any or most young black men do. Uh, Go out here and get into all kinds of stuff. But before I asked you that, what he was talking about, what sparked you? Did somebody come and get you? Uh, what made you want to join the 5%ers and the 5%er itself? What made you want to do that? Because at that time, this prayer probably around the 50s or the 60s.
5%, Nation of 5%, Nation of Gods and Earths. That happened in the 60s. If I'm
Wow,
correct, the time would have been under Mayor John V. Lindsay, if I'm remembering
wow.
correctly. Uh, I want to say around 66 or seven. I don't recall really off the top of my head now. I do know that it followed the assassination of Malcolm X, Malik Shabazz, which ironically, and I hope I don't do too much of this jumping around stuff, but
No, please teach.
the night after his assassination, the mosque, number 7, was firebombed, corner of 116th Street and Lenox Avenue. It's now Malcolm X Boulevard, but it was firebombed. The night after it was firebombed, my mother took me to that mosque, and we crossed that police line. I was 7 years old, and we climbed the stairs and went and stood up on the roof right beside the dome with the Star and Crescent on top of it. And we're just standing there looking over Harlem. My mother was a very unusual and interesting character. And that was one of the many things that she did with me that left an indelible impression. The autobiography of Malcolm X was high on the sales charts at that time. And to make the story a little shorter, I always had that interest in the back of my head. Now, there was a program in New York City in the early 70s, may have been in the late 60s as well, but it was called Model Cities. And this particular program involved taking youngsters, mostly high schoolers at that time, or those of us who were going into high school, and sending us to summer school. But the summer schools were situated on college campuses, and we would basically spend the summer at a college, going to summer school and living in the dorms. And what it really did was demystify college life, demystify the university experience, to the degree that it removed a lot of the fear that some of us would have had about going away from home and going to school. So it was intended to encourage us to experience learning in that kind of an environment. My first experience was at Hofstra University out in Hempstead, New York. And some of the friends there that I made, I still have to this day. And
Wow.
it's been almost half a century of being friends with these people. The following summer, I was 15. The following summer, I went to Morris Brown College, which was in Atlanta. It's now part of the Atlanta University system. And they split the group up. Some of us went to Clark, some of us went to Spelman, and some of us went to Morris Brown. Some of the young brothers that I met and we connected at Hofstra were somewhat different when they got to Morris Brown that following year. They were more serious and more focused, and the energy was different. And as we like to say, unalike attracts. Those of us that weren't quite as disciplined, we at least could notice them and perceive a difference. And some of us were attracted enough to the changes that we saw that we wanted to partake. And that was when I began my study with the Nation of Gods and Earths, or the Nation of 5%. From there, after a couple of years of that study and 2 years of noticing that almost all of the work that we studied, written across the top of it, was Lost Found Muslim Lesson number 1, Lost Found Muslim Lesson number 2, Lost Found Muslim Lesson C1, like that, and I realized that we didn't originate those lessons. And it just seemed like the most sensible thing for me to do. This was my thinking at the time. I should go where the lessons originated at if I really want to get an in-depth understanding of what they were about. And that was how I wound up going to the Nation of Islam.
Wow, that's pretty heavy, brother. Let me ask you this, sir. If I can, I just want to say, I know you're an amazing father, but before we go any further, the term respect royalty. Want to give a shout out to your son, my baby brother, even though he's an OG to all of us, man. Amir Bey, we love you, man. That was you that asked, please make it public so I can share. We thank you for having you on. Actually, before I spoke to you, sir, I spoke to getting him on, but he's always on the road making that big cash, making that big money. Soon to be owning 6 trucks. We're proud of you, brother. We love you as a father, as a brother.
No
What would you
doubt.
say? I gotta kind of just throw it in there. How was Amir as a child, and where do you see the level of him being as a man today? What would you say about him as a child and how he is a man today?
Wow. Wow. He was a very, very lovable child. Very lovable child. He had you ever see those postcards or greeting cards, and they've got the puppy or the kitten with the really big eyes, and
Yes,
that was him. That
right.
was him. He had really big eyes and expressive eyes and a very curious mind. He was built small. You would never, in 100 years, connect the little boy that you saw back then to the man you see now.
The muscular man.
Oh,
Yes,
listen, he's a bear, brother. When he came, he drove his truck not too far from where I'm living now, in Detroit, and so he stopped by for a visit one evening to sit with Yolanda and I. And man, when he hugged me, it was like God, boy. You felt like you were in the embrace of a bear, man. I mean,
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
but it was heaven, man. It's every man's dream, if he's got a son, to have a son like well, to me he's Fahim, but Amir is his middle name, and it was my grandmother who raised me that gave him that part of his name, and I respect my ancestors. You know, that was one thing that I didn't mention earlier that I'm remiss. I had an analysis of the mitochondrial DNA, which only follows the mother's line, and I found that through my mother's line, my people are both Fulani, which is a nomadic Muslim ethnicity across the whole of West Africa, uh, but my particular part was discovered in Nigeria, what's now Nigeria,
Wow.
and Yoruba, which also is in the southwest part of Nigeria. So the 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 way that Islam showed up in my life without me looking for it, it found me really and lifted me. But so did the culture of Ifa, which is the Orisha culture.
Yes,
That's
sir.
also out of the same place. And so both of those things are a part of my spiritual practice now. And I did not know that Fulani and Yoruba were a part of my blood lineage until after I was already claimed by the both of them.
Wow. Let me ask you this, brother. On that note, there are some people out there that have been raised that strictly the Bible or only Muslim or only this or only that. They almost treat it like a gang. And so what advice would you have them if they're fearful or their pastor or imam may say, hey, don't study those lessons over there because the first thing they say it's of the devil. It's not right. What advice would you give folks for that?
Well, the first thing that springs to mind is seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave, even if it be in China. Those
Mm.
were the words of Prophet Muhammad ibn
Alayhi
Abdullah
salatu wasalam. Yes, sir.
of Arabia, a little over 1,400 years ago. When he said, even if it be in China,
Wow.
it's because China at the time was largely an unknown. The Great Wall of China kept the barbarians out, and to the Chinese of that era, anybody who wasn't Chinese was a barbarian. They did not let them in. You think we got an attitude about the wall down in across the southwestern United States, blocking out Mexico? These folk were very serious. You've seen pictures of the Chinese wall, and wow. But Prophet Muhammad's position, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was if you have to go into a place that isolated from your daily experience to find more knowledge to the believer, knowledge to the Muslim is like his own lost possession. Wherever he finds it, he claims it. It becomes a part of his possessions. So To me, that's the wrong message. If you really have the courage of your convictions about what you are studying and what you are teaching, it shouldn't be a problem for people to look at and to investigate and to study other things. They will find for themselves which one is the right one, and if that's it, then that's it. That would be no problem. You don't. Pardon me. Lose. You don't lose it. You don't lose what's correct. You add on to it, but you don't lose it.
Mm.
That's powerful. Muhammad, I can see your bells turning over there, brother.
Yes, yes, it is. I see those ancient relics behind him, all those books he got behind his head. I wonder what's on that shelf.
Oh, brother, I,
He
to
gave me
be
a
honest
treat
with you,
earlier.
I, I have what I have now is a few books. It's only one line of shelves. But I used to at one time when I was a much younger man, I had a room of nothing but books. I had shelves. I want to say I had shelves on 3 out of the 4 walls, and the fourth it was only because it had a window. I was in the Navy back then. I was in my early mid 20s.
But let me ask you something, Brother Bay.
Sure.
To people who don't read, why is it important to read? Nobody wants to read. They want to listen to it. But it's a difference
Right.
between listening and reading.
It is.
So would you or even studying, so would you, in your own words, let people know the difference between reading and listening?
Well, first of all, reading is visual. It's a visual experience, and listening, of course, is an auditory experience. And they activate different parts of the brain, and so you're learning in a different way.
Yes, sir.
We remember much more of what we see than we do of what we hear,
Mm.
and we remember it for a longer period of time. This is proven fact. This is neurological fact. Um, but I did a little exercise with my classes, and this is what I would do. I would have them close their eyes, and I would talk to them about a scene. For instance, I would say, okay, so now there is a rider, and the rider is riding a horse, and it's dark, it's nighttime, and this rider is riding, at a furious pace, trying to make it to a certain destination. He's got some really critical news that has to be passed on, and as he's galloping through the forest, he comes to where a tree has fallen. He's got to jump his horse over the tree, and what have you. And I would narrate this little passage, and as I'm describing it, everybody, 35 students, are all having a completely different vision in their head based on what I'm describing. What the rider looks like, what kind of horse it was, how big the horse was, how was the rider dressed, what did the forest look like when he jumped the horse over the fallen tree, what did that look like? And my aim at the time, I was trying to have the students understand something about the difference in how the brain processed the information. And when you read, you're hearing the voice inside your own head, but you're also seeing something. When you're reading it, you're exposed to a lot more, and you retain it for a lot longer than what you heard.
Okay. So what type of books are on this shelf? What do you got on there?
Well,
What doesn't he have is a question, okay?
directly behind me, these books over
Yep.
here
Okay.
are all books about the Bible. This is a Bible. This Bible is Wow, this Bible here is from I believe the early 1800s. I got my mother's Bible. I have my largest Bible. On this section here, all of these books are about Ifa and Orisha culture. Next to that, all of these books are the Quran translations and books about Islamic commentary. Down here, all these books have to do with organization development. That's my professional life. Sociology of organizations, strategic planning for public organizations, so forth and so forth. One of my professors wrote this book. It's called The Workplace Within, and it's talking about psychodynamics by Larry Hirschhorn. Underneath that, all of these books down here, these are all about the research, the craft of research, social research as a practice, leadership, evaluation, general systems theory. All of these are theoretic books mostly. Then over here, these books on this shelf all pertain to reading. I actually have a book up here called How to Read a Book, because there are several different ways to read the same book and get different information out of it. Teaching online, Blackboard for Dummies, what have you. These books down here, these are all books on sociology. Here's one. I don't know if it'll reverse the title. Sometimes these things, they reverse.
It says
Hitler's
Hitler's
American model.
Yes.
Okay.
That's sociology. Hitler in the 30s sent some of his top minds, his best and his brightest, to America to learn how to construct race law. He studied the Jim Crow system that America had created in order to be able to go back and guide the legal process in his Holocaust.
So he wrote a book called Mein Kampf. He wrote a book called Mein Kampf too, didn't he?
Mein Kampf, My Life.
Okay, so Hitler didn't Hitler, the people from Germany, then they build the rockets.
Yes.
They built the rocket and atomic bombs and stuff like Albert Einstein. Didn't he default from Germany over here? Did he default?
Yes. Well, the thing is that the Germans had created the V1 and V2 rockets.
Okay.
And they were just about at the point where they were going to be able to hit London from Germany with that rocket, and it was going to be over. It was going to be done. Okay. So they were on a real rush, the United States and Russia, trying to get the world believes that that race to Berlin between Russia and the United States was about saving the Jews. Well, that was the ostensible thing. That was the outside appearance of it. They were after that technology.
Right.
They knew that whoever could get that technology first would have the upper hand for a long, long time.
So, Brother Bay, before you go on, I love it. So you're telling me that the United States took Nazis and brought them here to help them further their studies of things that they didn't know?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because the science had already been, the technology had already been invented. Right. They were in the process of perfecting the technology now.
Wow.
And they already saw that Hitler was falling. They knew Hitler was falling. His program couldn't, it was not a program that could go on forever.
Wow.
And he was not well in the mind. So how far and how long he could run, it was in the foreseeable future that he was going to collapse. His society was going to collapse. They needed to be able to get that technology in their hands before the other man could get the technology in their hands.
Wow.
And Russia, at the time, the Soviets, they were our biggest concern at the time. I shouldn't say our. They were the United States' biggest concern, though. The powers that run the United States, and so they needed to get that first. And then once they did, they began to grant various kinds of amnesty to those scientists so that they could bring them here and have them continue to work here. And that's what they did. And they, as soon as they were able to create the National Space Program, well, you know, a lot of that technology made it into that program. The splitting of the atom and the release of atomic energy, atomic power, nuclear power. You see, this is, and this kind of touches on another topic that we're not actually talking about now or yet, but will be. And that has to do with A, knowledge, and B, secrecy.
Right.
And this was one of the things that in my early adulthood, I had learned to despise a certain group of people because of the notion of secrecy.
Right.
And having knowledge and hiding the knowledge or keeping the knowledge to yourself and that type of thing. And I understood it only partially. I understood it as a selfish way to approach life. But at the same time, some knowledge is simply too dangerous to be in general consumption. You know, I mean, even for the people who the Bible is their practice and their study, the problem arose with the acquisition of knowledge. Eating from the tree of knowledge was where the problem began. Knowledge is a very, very powerful thing. And
I'm just taking this in over here, Mo.
You know, for the responsibilities of the knowledge that you carry, it becomes an extremely dangerous thing. It can wreak havoc. It can kill millions and has killed millions. And look at what happened because there was a failure to have achieved psycho-spiritual maturation and a love of humanity. Then when that atomic knowledge was released, what happened? In order to prove to Russia how dangerous an adversary the United States is, if you decide you want to test us, let me turn to these brown people over here and show you what we have. And Japan was already in the process of its own surrender. All Japan was interested in at that point, at the end of World War II, was being able to surrender the war and still maintain a shred of dignity. That was all Japan wanted, was how do we do this and still have dignity? We're not still trying to fight with you, okay? We know that we have lost this war. The United States knew that. The United States knew that Japan was giving up the adversarial position and bombed both of those cities anyway to make a point to somebody else. So that means that they didn't have the humanity and the spiritual and the psycho-emotional maturity to not take that kind of a course to prove a point. So that's a perfect example of what can happen when you aren't prepared and you're not ready for the knowledge that you get hold of. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You look like we're in class. Throw
Yes,
the
sir.
hand up.
I am in class.
Amen, brother.
Let me ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with a guy named Paul Mellon, Henry Ford, and Prescott Bush? Are these three people, did they help finance Hitler? Is this fantasy or is this fiction?
No, brother, that's it's not. Listen, if you had a list of the names of the people who, if they didn't finance him, they at least backed Hitler, you might be surprised at some of the names. Now, back in 1932 or 3, there was a man. I want you to write this name down, and you folks in the audience, you do the same thing. His name was Smedley, Smedley, Smedley Darlington, middle initial D,
Butler.
Smedley D. Butler. Smedley D. Butler was the highest ranking general in the U.S. Marine Corps at the time of his service.
Yeah.
When he retired as the highest ranking Marine. Now they've increased ranks since then. They've added on a couple, but I want to say he was a major general, and that was the highest rank at the time. Smedley D. Butler was no slouch. He earned the Medal of Honor, which is the U.S. Congressional Medal of Honor, is the highest honor you can receive as a military person. It doesn't matter the branch of service. That medal, if you have that medal on you, the highest ranking officer, and you are the lowest ranking enlisted man or woman, they must salute you.
Wow.
Can I raise my hand? Professor, I have a question. This is great. Listen, this is heavy. I got to pay some bills real fast. Y'all at the bottom, Cash App, ShawnSpilman, please contribute. 20% of whatever we give goes to our guest. Please don't be stingy. Like Maya Angelou says, you want to see what people care about, follow their wallet. Listen, I have to give a shout out to a few people. Look at this. Amir Bey, brother Rashied, you might know a Jel Crossland, a female.
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, she's on here. Our brother Rick Welch says to you, Islam. He gives us great. He's a Moorish brother, very powerful. Stomp Jones, knowledge is power. Our brother Tony Johnson, what's up, brother?
Hey,
so
Tony.
He just wants to say hello. We gotta on this show we like to interact with our guests, man, because we believe they can be anywhere, but their time is precious. Indeed. And for those to look at sit and listen to two men with white hair. Muhammad, you got any white hair on your face, or you shave it off?
No.
It's an honor. Okay, now I got to get into something that's very controversial we spoke about earlier. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching, it's about to get hot. Put your AC on. Get ready to fire up a foaming at the mouth shout out. Listen, evil networks. You talked about Freemasonry, right? In the church, particularly the black church, the Freemasonic view most people hold is that which is secret, that which is evil, that which is plotting and controlling every movement that happens behind closed doors, from 9/11 to all these big things. First of all, what would you say about that in defense? I don't think it needs in defense of Freemasonry. And then take as much time as you need to get on some things such as are your opinions of what really are evil networks.
Okay, well, in that case, I need to tie up what I was getting ready to tell you about Major General Butler.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's quite fine. And then I'll segue right back into the question on Freemasonry. The reason I mentioned General Butler is because, and this is a little bit of history for people to consider looking into. You may have heard about the term Banana Republic. And basically what it is that there was the Monroe Doctrine, President Monroe, who basically threatened European countries and said, listen, if you come and you mess around with any countries in the Western Hemisphere, you're interfering with our backyard, which is a heck of a way to conceptualize your international neighbors as they are a part of your backyard. You live in the big house, essentially. But banana republics basically meant where U.S. business interests could go, in the Caribbean, in Central and South America, and set up shop. If you want to see a cinematic reference to it, think Godfather Part 2. And there's a scene where the Cuban president Batista is sitting at this long table. He's at the head of the table, and all these high-powered American business interests sitting, including the mobsters, sitting at this long table on both sides, and they're passing a solid gold telephone from one to the other. That was the gift to the president of Cuba from the president of IT&T, International Telephone and Telegraph, which eventually became AT&T, and then later on was broken up into some other different companies as well. The point being, the freedom to just run amok and run business however they chose to, and they would choose some strongman and make him the president. This is what the Sandinista War was about down in Nicaragua. Somoza wound up becoming their chosen dictator, and he and his family ruled for like 40, 45 or so years. And the last one, the youngest one, was the one who got overthrown by the Sandinistas. Anyway, long story short, General Smedley Butler was the leading U.S. Marine in the Banana Wars, and there were many other wars that he fought in. He wound up ultimately, when he retired from the Marine Corps, writing a book called "War is a Racket," and he realized that for the past 34 years of his Marine Corps career, that he basically had been a gangster for the United States business interests. Well, I mention it because the U.S. business interests at the time, 1933 or maybe 34, tried actually to overthrow President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in something that was called the business plot, and they attempted to recruit Major General Butler to lead the coup against Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He wound up ultimately testifying before the House committee. I think it was the Committee on Un-American Activities. But if it wasn't that committee, it was one of the House committees, and he testified about that. But no one was ever arrested. No one was ever imprisoned for it. But I mentioned them because that plot, and at the time that it happened because a lot of those business interests were backing and having cozy relationships with Adolf Hitler. You know, people don't know that the same Bayer aspirin they take right now, that company was the company that made the pills that they would drop in to create the poison gas that was used in the showers that killed the Jewish and other prisoners in the concentration camps. They would send them in that they're taking a shower, and then the gas would be pumped in through the shower heads.
That's
Bayer aspirin. It's the same Bayer aspirin company.
Good God Almighty.
BMW, Volkswagen. Volkswagen was commissioned by Hitler. Volkswagen means the people's car. The Volkswagen, the wagon, people's wagon, people's car. He wanted a moderately priced car that had great utility for family-sized groups. A sense of history, brother. If we don't have that, man, we don't even know what it is we're looking at and what it is we're hearing now. So now, as far as the Freemasons go, you know, a lot of people think of the Freemasons as a cabal, you know, and you hear a lot of this, you know, stuff about the Illuminati and what have you. The Illuminati, the original Illuminati, doesn't exist anymore. It was the brainchild of Adam Weishaupt, and it was shut down because what happened is it was its own organization, and they used it to infiltrate Freemasonry.
So this guy Adam Weishaupt, is that Albert Pike?
No.
So Albert, that's not him. So let me ask you something. In the Freemasonry, you're familiar with Albert Pike?
Of course.
Albert Pike, Scottish Rite Masons. What's the difference between the Scottish Rite Masons and the Prince Hall Masons?
First, that's a whole other question.
Without revealing
Yeah.
everything you
We,
have.
hold on. If you don't mind, can we hold up on that? Can we let him get into answering that one question about Freemasonry and people's outlook on it?
Yeah, because that's
If he could talk, that's very important. Not trying to cut you off, Muhammad, but that is going to clear up a lot of misconception for people. If you don't mind, I didn't mean to cut you off, Muhammad.
we can circle back to it. I mean,
Okay.
I just wanted, you can do it, but I just want to show you where I'm coming to. I just want to show you the relevancy of what I'm talking about. You can come back.
I got you. Now, first of all, it's important to say that to say that Freemasonry is or isn't a particular thing is not to say that there are not individuals who leverage Freemasonry for their own purposes. But you got physicians who do the same thing. You got people in every profession you can think of who do the same thing. And the extent of influence that they are able to have to the disadvantage of others and the benefit of themselves is a product of their imaginations and their particular social network within that organization. But see, Freemasonry is not a monolith. It's not one organization that is all over the entire world. It is a network of organizations. Every state in the United States has its own Grand Lodge. It is its own standalone Grand Lodge. Does it have relationships with other Grand Lodges around the country? Yes. Every state that has a Prince Hall Grand Lodge, which is a predominantly and historically Black or African American or indigenous parallel organization with its own history, you will find that in every state too. And you will find that in most cases, almost all cases, except for maybe one or two, I can't remember the exact number now. I think Mississippi and Alabama are the last two holdouts that will not recognize Prince Hall Masonry as legitimate, but all the others do, and around in the world as well. But these are all different Grand Lodges. They're not all the same thing. And, you know, I don't know if you've ever heard of, oh God, what is his name? Henry Templeton. Henry Templeton was the third Viscount of his particular property. I don't remember the name of it now, but he was in England. He was a Secretary of State. He was Premier. I'm sorry. Was it Prime Minister?
Take your time.
I'm trying to remember if it was. I don't remember his title now. But at any rate, his title was the equivalent of our Secretary of State. He was from England, from Great Britain. And in speaking to the House of Commons back in the early 1800s, he said, and I paraphrase because I can't remember the exact quote, that we have neither something along the line of, we have neither permanent allies nor perpetual enemies. We have perpetual and permanent interests. And it's our duty to follow our interests. So you may find that somebody is your enemy at the beginning of the week, but because of your interests and where their interests may align sometimes with yours, they may be your ally by the end of the week. And allies that you started out with at the beginning of the week may, because of competing interests, have become your enemies. Now, imagine if we were to conduct our affairs as individuals in that same way. Maybe we wouldn't hold on so tightly to enemyhood. You know, now, you know, we have different groups and subgroups and subcultures amongst ourselves. As a nation, as a country, but also as social groups within that country. And you can pick any 2 or 3 that you choose in your mind. You know who you observe and what you see, but you got people and different activities, different colors, and what have you. Imagine if people were able to relax on that score, relax their grip, and look at what really is in their interests and what's not. What people they might embrace. Some of the very ills that we have in our neighborhoods, ills that we have within our cities, we would not have if we were able to relinquish our hold on insisting that so and so and so is our enemy when we've got the same interests.
Wow. That's a great point. Muhammad, we can go on for years on this, right? This is like getting our PhD on YouTube from our brother. Yes. Brother Rashied Bey, and Muhammad, are you guys able to see if people are able to watch? Is your live?
Yeah, I can see the live. I can see my
Okay,
live.
great. That's good to know.
I looked on my phone,
I'll
and
go
I
to
haven't
you.
been able to tell.
Let me go look real fast. See, let's see. Let's go right here. And I don't see it yet. Okay, I see where it says 3
It
hours
should
ago.
be on your Facebook page. It should be on your Facebook page.
That's
Yeah,
where
I
I
don't.
am, but I don't
I'm
see
on
it.
I'm on his page. Okay, that's fine. Okay, and Muhammad, you see yours?
Yeah, I can see the live on my phone.
I don't know
I
what
I
I
can
did
see your
wrong.
live. I'm on your live on my phone, on my page.
I'm gonna go to your page as well too, Muhammad.
Yeah, go to my page. Because if I'm
Yeah.
on your live, it should be on my live.
Okay, we'll work it out. We're getting it together. Yes, I don't see it, but because I was wondering. Okay, cool.
I need
So,
that. Just
okay. On that note, you were clarifying, but about people's understanding of Freemasonry, and if I could get you to expound on, since people classify, a lot of ignorant people classify, and you did a wonderful job explaining. So people think Freemasonry is one big. The Pope is out there making a decision for all the Masons to run wild and do all these crazy things, right? But we really wanted to get on the evil networks. Can you share, in your view, from your studies, what are some of the evil networks that you think are affecting most people today?
Give me one moment. 1 second.
Yes, sir. Muhammad, I'm going to ask you a question while we got you for the brother. He's so deep and profound, man. This is a blessing to be able to get a scholarly brother like him on here. And unfortunately, or fortunately, a lot of people don't, they will later on, got to understand the true meanings of words and terms. Yes, my brother Rick Welch bring that up. Hey, Muhammad, we got to get our brother Rick on here. It's very deep. Salam, brother. What do you think, Muhammad, blessed us to get our brother on here? What do you think, man? How blessed are we?
very blessed. Very blessed to have somebody to give their time, because that's the only thing you can give. That's the best thing you can give a person is time. Once it's gone, it's gone. So when a man wants to give you his time, he's giving you him. That's the best thing you can ever give, in my humble opinion. I never met this brother before in my life. Well, what brings us together is he's willing to give me his time, and I'm willing to listen to him. Whether I agree with everything he says or not, that doesn't make any difference. But he's giving his time, and he's giving me a chance, so I can sit back and I can assess, and I can get something out of it if I want it. If I don't want it, hell, I ain't gonna get nothing out of it. But I want to get something out of it. So I appreciate you, sir. So I was about to ask him this question, though. I got to ask him. If they tied all around back to what we were saying about Freemasonry and Alvin Pike and the Scottish Rite Masons, is there a difference in white masonry and black masonry? Is there a difference because like you were saying, some people do use stuff for evil, no matter what it is. But you were saying we have a particular interest. If I know you didn't say it, but if we could go into love, that's why you open up the Bible and it says, love you one another. If we did that, just close the book. But we got so much other stuff going on, like all this and that, all these distractions. So a lot of times, brother, you so powerful and you so sharp. And sometimes, man, you up here way up in the class. And sometimes, man, it's hard to understand because, I mean, your frequency. You got a high frequency, a very, very, very high frequency. And so I'm just trying to break it down in the best, in the lowest terms as possible. You just basically get said, man, all of this love will cast all this stuff away. That's basically what you said.
Well, here's the thing. See, one of the earliest studies, since we are on the topic of Freemasonry, one of the earliest studies that a Mason is presented with is a study of grammar. You wouldn't think so. We go to grammar school basically as grammar school for us is elementary school. All right. You learn to spell correctly. You learn that some words have two different meanings. You learn about homonyms where words sound the same, but they're spelled differently. They have different meanings. You learn about synonyms where it's two different words, but they mean the same thing. You learn all these different rules of language so that you can learn how to make yourself clearly understood. You can avoid having people think you're saying one thing when you're really saying something else. How many times has it happened to you in your life personally?
1,000.
That you were at odds with somebody. Maybe you all were even having an argument. And then somewhere along the way, the two of you discovered, wait a minute, we both saying the same thing.
Right.
All because of grammar. Okay. So it's important that we have the right words and that we understand the words we're using and the words that are being spoken to us. It's key to the understanding. We find that we don't have enough awareness of ourselves, and we think that we are speaking from a certain position. We really aren't in the position we think that we're in. We may not be championing the right things because we think that we're standing on ground that we're not standing on, and we haven't obtained sufficient self-awareness to realize where we actually are in relation to our surroundings and our neighbors. Love, we think of love as a noun. A noun is the name of a person, a place, or a thing. We think of love as an emotion. We're naming the emotion that we call love. And we are saying, this is a person we love. Well, see, in that context, guess what? Love is a verb, not a noun. It's an action word. It's a thing you do. How you love a person may show up in the way you speak. How you love a person may show up in the way that you listen to the other person when they speak. Do you really listen to them? Are you really giving them your attention? You know, at the root of the word attention is to attend. To attend means to turn to. When that person is speaking, do you turn your attention to them? You know, I used to kind of make a show of it just to create the impression. But when I was standing in front of my classroom, I would make a point of taking my earbud off and putting it on the desk and putting my phone on silent and laying my phone on the desk. Why? Because I was trying to convey to my students that I am here with you right now. If I get a call, I'm not going to take it. It's going to go to voicemail. I'll listen to it later. And I remember one of them asked me one day, well, what if your wife calls? There's nothing I can do for her right now. I'm 2 counties away. She knows that already. What if it's an emergency? I can't get to her that fast. If there's an emergency that's bad enough that it requires an ambulance, I can't get there in time, even if I want to. So for all intents and purposes, I'm here with you right now. You are what has my attention. And therefore, I have a right to expect the same thing out of you. So I'm not looking to see you on your phone in my class. You're going to miss something and it's going to be essential. It's going to show up on an exam. You're going to need to mention it in a paper. And you're not going to be able to because you're not going to know that information. And then what's the whole point of all the money that you're spending to be here with me if you're not here with me? So love is not only a noun, it's a verb. It's what we do. And the bulk of human problems arise because we do not do that. So one of the things that we talked about earlier, and the question arose as to who are some of these networks. Here's a book that I would like for you all to write down and get. Put this on your bookshelf and then read it. All the President's Bankers, the hidden alliances that drive American power, the relationship between Wall Street and the White House. It was written by Nomi Prinz. You go ahead and look up who Nomi Prinz is, and then you'll know why she's qualified to write that book. The other book that I look for and I don't find it on my shelf, maybe it's in another location, but the book was called The Invisible Bankers, and that book was by Andrew Tobias, 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 Andrew Tobias. The Invisible Bankers is a book about the insurance industry. You want to know about some evil networks? Look at the insurance industry. Look at the banking industry. Look at the central banks all over Europe and America. If you want to know about some evil networks. Networks where people exist and function outside, almost completely outside almost outside the rule of law. They can purchase the people who make law. You know, in this country, law is made by the legislature. There's this whole thing about the bill that used to come on TV as a cartoon for the kids. I can't remember the name of it now, but it was all about how a bill is created and how does a bill make it through to the president's desk from the House of Representatives to the Senate to be voted, and then to the president's desk to be executed into law. I don't know if it was Schoolhouse Rock or which one it was.
Schoolhouse Rock.
It was Schoolhouse Rock?
Yes, sir.
And so did you know that almost every member of the House of Representatives is a multimillionaire? Not all of them started out that way. But you know, when people want to curry favor with you and they want to make sure that you remember them kindly and fondly, they know how to appeal to you. They know how to butter you up, so to speak. Everybody who is in the Senate is a millionaire. So how well are they able to represent the interests of people who don't have those same kinds of interests? They don't have the same interests. They have the interests that protect money. Those are the interests that they have. Just look at the laws that get passed and the laws that get voted down, and then you'll know. This is the way that our legal system. Look at the tax codes. Notice the changes that the tax codes go through from year to year, and who they benefit. Look at the feudal system, and realize the feudal system of medieval Europe, and realize that America, as a social experiment, really was intended to be feudalism 2.0. Understand that when we say we the people protect and serve, we the people never meant the unlanded people. Obviously, it did not represent people of color. Obviously, it did not represent women. It represented the landed gentry, white men who owned land, because that's what the feudal system was about. Did you ever hear of a game when you were a kid? It was called King of the Hill.
Oh, sir.
There was a game called King of the Hill, and the whole object was you had to be able to push the king of the hill off the hill and become the king of the hill. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to, in your mind's eye, I want you to look at a hilltop from above, an aerial view, and you're going to look down on this hill. And as you're looking down on this hill, here's what you're seeing. You're seeing a bullseye, and the dot that's in the center of the bullseye is at the center and top of the hill. And that's where the king's castle is. And then you got another circle around that, and that is the circle of the nobility and the aristocrats. Now, aristocracy was all about what land you owned, how much you owned, and where that land was situated. So every aristocratic title has a particular piece of land that goes with it. So you had the earl, you had the duke, you had the marquis, you had these different, the barons, all of these different people with these titles all throughout Europe. Those titles represented parcels of land. So the landed gentry were the people who they were the ones who could influence law because they had the greatest stake. The serfs didn't own any land, and not only did the serfs not own land, but the serfs were a part of the package. So if I had a parcel of land as a baron, for instance, and I wanted to sell my land, some of my land to you as an earl, for instance, then when you bought that parcel of land, you also were buying the serfs who worked that land. They were essentially slaves. They couldn't leave because they were part of that land. One of the big things about the Freemasons is that being a free Mason meant that you were someone who had the knowledge of how to craft stone to build structures. And so the lords of the realm were the people who paid those men to build the cathedrals, to build the palaces, to build, whatever kinds of large edifices needed to be built. Those men had to have the scientific skill and the practical skill to be able to put that together. That wasn't something that you could just come and just sit down and do. You had to go through years and years of training, not only to understand it theoretically, but to even be able to execute what it was that you knew in your mind. You had to have the freedom to travel because you had to go to where the buildings needed to be worked on. And that's how it became a thing of being a free Mason, a stone mason who was free to travel when other people were not. And then of course there's a certain kind of benefit that comes to being able to travel, But this Constitution and this Declaration of Independence that talked about we the people, it did not mean the common people. It meant the people who were going to be the new aristocracy. And there were two new aristocracies, one in Massachusetts and one in Virginia, because you had Plymouth Rock and you had Jamestown. Things that occurred in the history as a result of that setup. Everything that we see today grew out of that. Case in point, let us look quickly at Bacon's Rebellion. Bacon was a one of the wealthy landowners in Virginia. He was one of the planters, and what happened is that he wanted more land, and the only way to get land was to take it from the natives that lived here, take it from the indigenes, and the other wealthy planters did not want to back his play because they had finally gotten a measure of balance, and there wasn't as much fighting going on anymore about this land that they had already come here and taken as colonists. And so they didn't back him. What he did is he then went and he united his own workers against the other wealthy landowners. And he preached to them so hard against the wealthy landowners, even though he himself was one of them. But he preached against them so that he could get them to unite. He got the Irish and Scottish indentured workers to unite with the free black laborers and those who were imported up from the Caribbean to Virginia, who were enslaved. And he united them in a coalition and led them against the other landowners. They burned the Jamestown, Virginia, to the ground. They ran the king's governor of the Virginia colony out of Jamestown for his life. Now Bacon died. The following, this was in 1675. In the spring of 1676, he died. I think he died of consumption. But his people kept on fighting and terrorizing and overthrowing. And they finally were able to put down this rebellion. They knew that they needed to do something so severe that this kind of a coalition could never rise again. So the first thing they did was they got the leaders, black and white, and they beheaded them. And they put the heads on pikes outside the gate of Jamestown.
Wow.
This is what your future is going to be if you ever go against us again. But they were smart. They knew that brutality only could last so long as a way as a deterrent. They had to put a system in place. This is what we do when we want long-lasting results. We put a system in place. And so what did they do? They created something that came to be known as the racial bribe. And the racial bribe went like this. First of all, we realized as white landowning men that we left you guys out. And we have to include you in the club. So we're going to give you some land too, okay? Every free white man is going to get 50 acres. Now, it's nothing like the tens of thousands of acres that I own, but you'll have 50 of yours and it'll be your castle. And then, this is why some states still till today have castle doctrine and stand your ground states and all of that. It all goes back to then. Then you got this. We will protect your labor. What does that mean? It means that if there is a choice between choosing the labor and the product of a black laborer and a white laborer, we will prefer the labor or the product of the white laborer over the labor or the product of the black laborer. You will be protected, even if your labor is inferior. Even if your product is inferior, we will always give you the leg up over him. Why? Not because it's in our interest to have an inferior product, not because it's in our interest to have an inferior service, but because it's in our longer term interest to have you on our side rather than making a coalition with him. That is in our long-term interest. And it is our interests that we have the duty to observe. We don't have perpetual friends and eternal enemies. Remember? We have and eternal interests.
Yes,
and
sir.
it's in our eternal interest that you and he do not coalesce again like you just did before.
Brother, before you go on, can you read the bottom screen and does that name ring something to you? Can you read the bottom of the screen? Can you see it on our live? Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's my baby girl, man.
That's his baby girl. She's on.
That's my baby girl. Yeah.
She's in a donation, man. Bless her heart.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Listen, let me tell you what I love about the job, right? Okay, so now she's a beautiful woman, very brilliant. And I promise I'll get back to it. So when I first met his children, I didn't meet him. I met his children in Raleigh, and his eldest son, we became best friends. And I got to see the other two boys and the other two girls, and Sister Fakria was kind to me. And I remember they were the first Muslims I met. Najah's
Wow.
listening to this as I tell. So I was scared to go in their house, not because they're black. That didn't scare me, right? I saw the Holy Quran in there and I was like, oh, they're nice, but are they terrorists? Because that's all I knew, right? And his oldest son became my best friend.
Wow.
And we go places and he'd say, Assalamu alaikum to people. And I was trying to preach the gospel to him. And it's funny how years later I became Muslim and he went to Christianity. Now he's Muslim, but Najah, I love you, man. We used to at the house, Sanaa, not so much the boys, except for the eldest, Jabril. We used to have deep conversations. But back then, when she was young, brother, she was brilliant. She was, man, her knowledge. Okay, you're looking at, I'm talking about back to 2001, 2002, when we started having the conversations again.
Yeah.
And man, I want to give a shout out to the sister. Yeah, she says, yeah, you've been family. That's family to me. And you and I have never had the blessings of meeting in person. So this is like the coming home for me. This is like a reunion. Even though you look the same age as me, you were like a father figure to me. They always bragged about you. And she says, now I say, I was just blessing her in the inbox. We were talking back and forth about her knowledge. She said, you see where I get it from now. So let's pray for our sister. I hope she don't, she's sick right now. So we're going to send her. But even in her sickness, she's watching her Abu, her daddy. Now, I have to say this. We asked about Amir. We asked about all your children. Before the show is over, I'll have you talk about each individual. What would you say about your baby girl? Where do you start?
Yeah.
It's okay to cry too, man. I cry over mine.
Yeah, and trust me, I do. From before her beginning, I always had a deeply protective spirit. We're not supposed to, as fathers, we're not supposed to have a favorite. And so I consciously did everything I could not to do that. But circumstances were such that I was caused to. The juxtaposition between us was one of an overarching kind of protection mindset, and she was the smallest, not only because of age, but just because of her natural physical attributes. She just was a small child, and very sweet, and yes, very, very bright. And I always wanted to foster that. Now, the challenge is that we, as we were talking back in the studio, there's the thing of manifestation of defect, and every stone has a defect. And the key, first of all, is to find the defect, and then the second key is how do I make this defect or this flaw in this stone, this fault line, something that adds to the beauty of the stone and the worth and the value of the stone. And so I could not be a perfect father because I could not be a perfect man.
Gosh.
And there for a father, there's pain in that.
Yes, sir.
Any father whose ear is hearing my voice right now knows that intimately. When you cannot be perfect in the places that you're not perfect, and that imperfection touches the lives of your children, or touches the lives of your mothers or your wives, because these are the people that you want most in the world to protect. These are the people that you would give your life away to protect. But you only have your best vision and your best judgment. And these, of course, are subject to your own imperfections. And you can only see so far. You can only know so far. You can only understand so far. And then even if you can see far, you may not necessarily have the capacity or the skill to execute what you see. So there's just so much that gets in the way and prevents you from being where you want to be. in terms of how you stand and where you stand, where your children are concerned. I hope my children find places that give them a little more ease in terms of forgiveness for me, for wherever my shortfalls have been. Some of them I know, but some of them I don't. I don't know what all of my shortfalls and shortcomings may have been, and how I may have had negative or adverse impact without meaning to, or without knowing that I was. And so I hope that they're able to have forgiveness for me in those places. But my children mean everything to me. They're the only way that I can go on living after I'm not here anymore. We die 3 times. I don't know if you know that.
Please, I don't. Yes, sir.
The first time we die is as children, when we learn that we shall one day as human beings leave this realm. We're terrified of that. When I was a kid, I remember distinctly being like 3-4 years old and having the thought in my mind, and I didn't realize the power of it at the time, but that I was able to make an association with the power in words. I believed that if I never spoke the word die, death, dying, dead, that I would not die. If I could somehow manage to get all through life and never speak that word, then it would never happen to me. I don't know how at 3 or 4 years old I made the connection between what you speak and what a reality unfolds, but that was my belief. But we find out that it's going to happen to us, and we're often terrified of it because we don't understand it and we don't know how it can be controlled, and then that leads to its own kind of fear because we fear what we can't control. The second death is when we actually transition and leave. The third death is when the last person who knows our name speaks it for the last time. When our name is never again spoken and never again, then that is when we have died that third and final death. And there's a movie, I think the movie's called Coco, about a little Mexican boy. And there is a character in that cartoon movie who is almost at the edge of that third death because his descendants don't know his name. And the last one who knows him is his own daughter, and she's about to die. She's old. And if she dies and he's not remembered by the descendants behind her, then that's it. He's gone forever. And this is how you can realize the gravity of bodies overboard on a ship on a transatlantic voyage. There are no descendants to call their names. Enslaved people of whichever ethnicities who died and were buried in unmarked graves, whose names will never be called again. That's it. We have to call them in general terms, but we can't speak their name because nobody's around to know it anymore. And in the Yoruba culture, which I referred to earlier, if you are remembered in that way to the 7th generation, then you become immortal.
Why the 7? Okay, break that down for us. 7 is such a powerful number. Why do they say 7? Because of the length of it?
Well, it's partly the practical matter of how long 7 generations is.
Yes, sir. Yes,
if
sir.
You take every generation and give it, say, 15 to 20 years. I say 15 because, physiologically, we're able to have a next generation by the time we're 14 or 15 years old. At one time, you were considered an adult. If you think back on that show, The Little House on the Prairie, Laura Ingalls and her husband, what was his name? Lonzo was like 15 years old.
Right.
And Charles Ingalls was her father, and Lonzo was basically apprenticed to him. He kind of had Lonzo under his wing as an older man and a young man of 15. He was old enough to be his father, but Lonzo was considered a grown man. His job at that point was to learn how to be a man, learn what manhood is and how to advance through it. Nowadays, we have created adolescence because of the industrial era, and because society has grown much more complex and requires a much greater degree and longer degree of learning in order to learn the technology that society runs by, we cannot become functional adults today without going through what is called transitional adulthood. And that runs from roughly 18 to about 28, 29, maybe 30 years old. Then you're fully an adult. But all that time, you're learning how to be an adult in a highly complex technological society like this one, which was not necessary back before the industrial era took hold.
May I give a shout out real fast before you go? One of our I don't even want to say one of our best listeners, because this is not one of our best visual brothers is our Spanish brother. He said, "Good evening, hermanos." Manuel Martinez, hola, ¿cómo están, mi hermano? Thank you for being here. Listen, he's coming on our podcast on the panel soon. Hey, give us some of those dope questions you be asking. Okay, sir, I'm sorry.
No, that's quite all right. That's quite all right. To make the long answer a short one, I've always felt very, very close to my children, and then of course as adults they've taken on different responsibilities, and their time has to be divided differently. But I say that I cannot go on living without my children. I cannot go on living without my grandchildren, without them knowing who I am, without them being around to speak my name and teach my name to their children. I and many other people, you and Azar and all of us, we become anonymous. So we have to, this is why veneration of the ancestors is so incredibly important, that we think of them, that we keep the relationships alive with them, talk to them, sit with them. I was going through something a couple of months ago and not sleeping well at night at all, and for all the things that I know and all the studies that I've done and all the various spiritual traditions and disciplines that I've belonged with, I was in a conversation with Najat, and she said, "Go sleep with the ancestors tonight."
Wow, she said that.
Yeah. And so, and I have my shrines, set up for having communion with my ancestors. And I did that. I made a pallet over by my shrine and got under a blanket, and I slept there. And it was one of the best sleeps I ever had.
Yes, sir.
Lying on the floor, but out of the mouths of babes, even when they're 40.
Right. On that note, if you don't mind, what would be some of the misconceptions you'd like to clear up, particularly in the Black community, but just the greater community overall, about staying in contact with the ancestors? Because some people look at it as shirk, associating partners with God. How would you clarify that misconception, or what advice would you give somebody that wants to tap into the appreciation of the ancestors, but from a spiritual perspective?
I'm gonna tie up a couple of questions on that. Questions on that answer, actually. I mentioned grammar a while back, and the part of grammar having to do with the definitions of words and usage. See, worship has other meanings than the one meaning most of us know. When we hear worship, we think of people sitting in a church, or we think of people on a prayer rug, or something like that.
Right.
That isn't the only meaning that it has. When we go into a court, we hear about somebody that you say your honor to. And I always...
Right. Yes, sir. Yes,
I got this running joke that I always fool around with my lady and tell her, there's this show that we like to watch called Your Honor. But back in the days when I was a kid, we used to watch the Three Stooges, and Curly got in trouble in court because he kept saying "my honor." The judge, he's calling the judge, "Hey, judgy, wudgy," and blah blah blah. And the judge says, "You don't refer to the court in that way. You have to have respect for the court." You're to address the court as Your Honor. So he said, okay, my honor. No, not Your Honor, my honor. He said, that's what I said, my honor. Well, the thing is, we refer to people in certain positions of authority and power as honorable. In England, they use the term venerable, someone that you venerate, someone that you honor. And it is also said worshipful. You put such and such a person to worship, or you give such and such a person honor, or you give such and such a person veneration. All these words are what we said before. We use the term synonym. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily like praying the way you would pray to the Almighty. It means that you hold them in a high esteem. Now, I will say though, the first iteration or experience of God that a human being has is their mother.
His Umi, you're right. You're right.
That brought that person. Their mother is the portal. You got to understand the power of this thing. Their mother is the portal through which they had to journey to get here, from one realm to another realm. When a woman is birthing a child, she has 1 foot on earth and 1 foot in heaven, because she can leave this life performing that task. And the child has 1 foot on earth and 1 foot in heaven, because that child can die in the process of getting here. And so that's the first connection we have to what we think of as God. Now, you may remember a little earlier, I was talking about not being able to join Freemasonry, but you have to be admitted to it. You have to be accepted into it and embraced by it to become a Mason. Why did I mention it? I mentioned it because I talked about the petition that a person has to make, a person has to ask. And where I was going with that is that there is a whole other questionnaire that I have that if someone were to ask me personally to assist them in the process of becoming a Mason, pardon me, I know it seems unrelated, but it isn't. I have an entirely different questionnaire that I give with 12 questions on it. And every question, there is a verse or a passage, a biblical verse or a biblical passage that provides the answer to that question. And at the end, when you finish these 12 questions, you have 12 biblical verses and passages that if you read them from start to finish, they shape a conceptualization of the relationship of the human being to the divinity, to the Almighty Divine. If a person is able to get their head around that conceptualization, then I will give them a petition for Freemasonry, because there's something I understand about what Freemasonry is and what it's not that those verses reveal. Without understanding that and understanding who we are in this universe and in the other universes for that matter, and without an understanding of the portals that connect these worlds and these universes, we're only playing games with that science and any of the other psycho-spiritual sciences that are similar to it. We're only playing games. The mother is the closest human being to anything like God, even before the Father, well before the Father. One man asked the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who, if it were permissible to worship a human being, not God, who would the person be? He said, your mother. No, there was no hesitation. There was no, let me think about this. No, it was right off the top. Your mother. Who behind that? Your mother. 5 times he answered that before, 5 or 6, before he said,
Say your
fine,
father.
and your father.
Yes, sir. Wow.
And it's because there are certain powers that, see, women have 5 powers that men do not have. 5 powers that men do not have. We may approach some of that power, certain ones of it, but some of them we come nowhere near. There is power in a woman's eyes that a man does not have. When a man looks at you a certain way, you know that he means business. You may even know that you're in a world of trouble. But when a woman looks at you a certain way, it freezes your whole soul. It clenches your whole entire stomach when she looks at you with that certain eye. If the woman speaks to you a certain type of way, trust when I tell you that there is the power of death and life. The Bible says that there is power in the there is the power of death and life in the tongue. When a woman speaks a certain way, it can give you life. It can give you life. It can freeze you and give you death at the same time. It has the power to do either one. Men's tongues don't have that same kind of power that a woman's tongue has. A woman has power in her generative parts, the parts that we have to come through to get here. All of us, male, female, we have to go through that part to get here. It's a passageway. It's a portal. And guess what? There is power in her blood. We don't have it. Women only have it. And we characterize it in certain ways and downplay it and talk about it as an uncleanness and what have you. But when blood has the power to have an egg in it, something that can become a whole human being is in that blood. We don't have that. And this is one of the reasons that men became so afraid of women, you know.
Preach on that.
One of the reasons that men were awe-inspired by this ability to produce life. There's something that we add to it, but the something that we add to it lends our chromosomes, and among our chromosomes are those that determine whether or not it's a male or a female child. But we can't make the child. She gets that stone and she shapes that stone and produces that stone into the world. What is there closer to God than that in a human form? So, yeah, there's that.
I love it, brother. Now, you see where the time is at. Can we keep you for 2 hours? You got about 27 more minutes. Is that past?
Yeah, listen.
Hey,
here now.
Hey, listen. I think Azar. I think he's got a what do you call it? Curfew. What time's your curfew, Azar?
I don't have no curfew, but you know, hey, you don't have to say a lot to say a whole lot.
Man, he's saying it, brother.
Yes,
I got a question to ask.
Sure.
If you don't mind, this is a topic that has been on the news frequently, man. It won't stop. Why are so many white people afraid of critical race theory, CRT?
First of all, they don't understand what critical race theory actually is. Critical race theory is a specialized study in the field of law that Derek Bell, professor out of Harvard, and a few other Black professors realized that, you know, there are these laws in this country, and yet somehow they don't seem to work as well for people of color as they do for white people. Why is that? What is that about? What is it about where if I'm in an accident in my car at night and I'm injured and I'm trying to get help, and I go and I walk up on somebody's porch and knock on the door, I may be shot in my face through the peephole, and that person can say, I was standing my ground. I felt myself in danger. Behind a locked door with a gun in my hand, I felt myself in mortal danger to the point that I needed to shoot this person, because that's happened before. But if in that same circumstance, a black person were to do that same thing, that same law somehow doesn't work for them to the same outcome. Well, critical race theory, first of all, is derived out of a concept called critical theory. And critical theory is one of three fundamental sociological perspectives. Sociology is the study of people, what they do, and why they do it. Sociology is one side of a coin because it deals with the outside of our human life, our human existence, why we do what we do. And the inside, the other side of that coin, is psychology. That deals with the inside of why we do what we do, the influence of who we are individually vis-a-vis the influence of who we are as a result of the society that we were socialized into. Because be clear, if we were raised in a different society, or if we were raised in the same society at a different point in time, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, we would be completely different people. Wow. In fact, there's a series going on right now called Kindred, based on the book by Octavia Butler, about a modern black woman living in California. She happens to be married to a white man. She has these seizures where she blacks out. And when she wakes up, she's in antebellum America. She's in the antebellum South, meaning pre-Civil War. She's somewhere in the early 1800s, but living with the mind of the woman and the experiences of the woman from California in modern time.
Wow.
All of these people who keep on saying, man, if I was back in those days, I'd have done that. You wouldn't have done jack. You know what I'm saying.
Right.
Because you're in a completely different time, and the things that you might have done would end you quickly because you're out of your time. You may still be in your place, but you're out of your time. And ultimately, through that story, she came to realize that she was one of her own ancestors. And had she killed herself, or had she put herself in a circumstance that would have gotten her killed, then later on, her later on self would not have been born. And all of those ancestors ahead of her, behind her and ahead of her at the same time, would not have been born. So she had to learn how to hold all that and manage and deal with all that for the sake of the lineage that was going to come behind her, leading up to ultimately her.
Wow.
So if you take a child, an infant born in the Amazon today, and bring that child here tomorrow morning and raise that child for the next 20 years, and then try to return that 20-year-old back to the Amazon, that child would not be able to make any contribution, real solid social contribution to his people, because he is a different person than he would have been had he been socialized by them. So our sociology tells us who we are and how we are, because we are influenced by our families, by the neighborhoods we live in, by the cities and the regions of the country we live in, which country within the world we live in. All of those things shape who we are. Now that we look at all of that, Brother Azar, please help me.
Critical. He said, "Why are so many?" I'm sorry. Go ahead, Muhammad. Why are so many white people terrified of critical race theory? Was that
critical
the question?
Race theory? Okay, so now that we have an understanding of what critical race theory is about, the critical part of it, it's that we either live our lives in terms of the function, a functionalist way of looking at society, where we are our role Go back to great-great-grandfather's time. In my case, my grandmother's or great-grandmother's time, where there was still a lot of family farms, and people lived their family life on the basis of the function that they played. Women had what we used to call the 4 C's. When it came out of German, it was 4 Ks, but in English, it was 4 C's. She was responsible for raising the children, bearing and raising the children. She was responsible for churching the children, giving them a spiritual and a moral foundation. That was called churching. She was responsible for their nutrition, so that was cooking. And that meant in those days that she knew which plants had which medicinal impact on the human body and the psychology. You know, back then they didn't reach for a jar of something. Back then it was, you know, hey, drink this tea, baby. Take a bath in these leaves. You know, they would put certain leaves in the bath water and make you soak in it. You know, certain foods and vegetables that they would have you eat. Certain spices and what have you that they would grow. Some people still grow them inside the windowsill in the kitchen. They got these little flower pots with the different plants in it, and they pull it off and put it in the soup while they're making it and what have you. And she was responsible for making and maintaining all the family's clothing. She basically ran everything under that house's roof. All her work was there. The man's work was everything outside, tending to the livestock, fencing the property, you know, repair. Listen, nobody cared about a pretty boy. Being a pretty boy, it didn't matter if you couldn't roof the house when the tornado tore it off. You had to know how to till the soil. You had to know how to get a crop produced and how to get that crop out of the ground and to the market in time. Because if you fell short, somebody was going to starve that winter and die. You were going to lose a part of your family. And so everybody performed according to their particular function. That was a functionalist way of looking at society. Then came the symbolic interactionist way of looking at society, where, okay, World War I, when it happened, it was the worst war humanity had ever experienced. Things were done in World War I that never had existed. Mustard gas, all this type of thing. People fighting trench warfare, which was horrific. Okay, seeing your buddies die happened in all wars, but we were at a different place as humanity. Our societies were at a different level of complexity because of the technology, and so here now we're walking through the field. We're marching, you know, not necessarily in formation, but we're moving toward the enemy, and a high-powered rifle snipes out one of our buddies. And this is a guy who has everything to live for. He's got a great life ahead of him. Maybe not us so much. Maybe we don't have a whole lot going on. And if anybody should have lived, it should have been him, not me. You with me?
Yeah.
And so the guilt, the survivor's guilt was great. And World War I had a lot of maimed people. I don't know if you ever watched a series called Boardwalk. There was a character named Jimmy who fought in World War I, became a member of the mob when he got out, but he died in the trenches because of the experiences that he had. Dying didn't mean anything to him anymore because once he had been through that. Well, why I mention it is because that war and surviving that war, even if you didn't fight in the war, you were a part of the society that fought that war, and it shaped how everybody thought. And so now people's thinking wasn't so much about keeping the system, the family system going. They used to sing a song, how are you going to keep them down on the farm after they've seen Paris? Well, these soldiers have gone overseas, and now they don't want to come back home to the small family farm. They want to live in the world. And their feeling and their attachment to the family farm wasn't strong like it had been prior. They didn't see themselves as a cog in the wheel. They started to look at themselves as individuals. What makes me happy? Before, people didn't get married because they were in love. They got married because this person had demonstrated excellence in the function that accrued to a wife and a mother. They had demonstrated excellence in the function that accrued to being a husband and a father. But this guy, he went to college. He doesn't know anything about the farm. This guy went to the university. He knows scientific things. He knows technological things. Yes, he's still going to be a father. Yes, he's still going to have the duties of provision, but it's going to be different. It's not going to be like part of a machine, which is why when a couple divorced under the functionalist system or perspective, we would say this child was raised in a broken home. A mother, she's looking for a father for her children. It's a role she's looking for. This man is a widower. His wife died of an illness. Maybe she died in childbirth. He's looking for a mother for his children. He's not looking for someone he's in love with. He's looking for a mother for his children to fulfill certain functions. She's looking for a father to fulfill certain functions. Society shifted because of World War I. And now people are looking at, am I happy? What is the meaning of my life? Why am I here? I didn't get hit by the bullet, but my life, it doesn't stack up next to the guy who did get hit by one. He stepped on a landmine and became like rain. He became a hamburger. Okay?
I don't mean to laugh. Lord forgive. Brother Rain or hamburgers.
Yes. But
that sounds like an Azar Muhammad statement.
I made it home. And I didn't even have anything going on. So, you know, things don't make sense to me now. So now people are starting to think of themselves as individuals, not as parts of a system. And then notice how by the time we got up to World War II, and all those black and white movies were coming out, and they were all what? Romance movies. They all began to be about my personal happiness. They began to be about a different way of approaching that relationship. Husbands and wives had to be in love first. Why? Because they had to be personally happy. It was no longer just about the function. It was about interaction now. And between human beings, men and men, women and women, men and women, parents and children, classmates, friends, all of these relationships began to be based on our interaction and what kind of interaction we're having. And so now symbols become important. Things begin to mean things because we're in the realm of talking about meaning. Why? Because what does my life mean? What is the meaning of my life? Symbolic interactionism. One really smart person in the marketing business latched onto that. A woman in a marketing department of a big corporate concern. She said, "We need a symbol. We need a symbol that we can sell our product with, that will capture in a way that it will become eternal." And then that's when she said, "Hey, diamonds are forever." It was the De Beers Diamond Company. And suddenly, that diamond engagement ring became the symbol that represented what a man's love for a woman looks like.
If it's a small diamond, he don't give a damn about her.
Right. Because as soon as he gives it to her, what's going to happen? There's going to be a big dinner. There's going to be a big engagement party. And what's going to happen? You know, men, you know, we're all together. It's not a thing where Brother Muhammad says, "All right, excuse me, I'm getting ready to go to the bathroom. One of y'all come with me." You going? I'm not. That's not our thing.
Right.
But women, always somebody
goes to the bathroom
together.
Somebody. They go in the bathroom together.
She got
hold
to
hands
hold the other one's purse. When that one comes out, she goes in. She's got to hold her purse. And guess what? There's going to be a meeting in the ladies' room, and these ladies are going to look and assess. And when they assess, they're going to tell her, "No, you better give him that back. He's going to have to bring you, you know, he gave you a rabbit, but you need a water buffalo."
Yeah, never bought one.
See, and so the thing is, what she's willing to accept is up to her. But the point remains that in Western culture now, that wedding ring, that engagement, that diamond engagement ring, which was invented solely in 1947 as a mechanism and system for selling diamonds. That's all it was.
Yes, sir.
But it became a symbol. And now the symbol tells the nature of the interaction. Okay. Well, there's a third perspective on society. The third sociological perspective is called critical theory. And critical theory is about the haves and the have-nots.
Mhm.
Critical theory is about social justice. Critical theory is about labor being disenfranchised or alienated from the product of its labor. By who? By the people who own the means of production.
Mm.
So I own some land. I decided I'm going to use my land. Some of my land is going to help me to pay for the services of some laborers who are going to come, and they're going to build an automobile factory on my land. I'm going to hire some people now to come in and be assembly workers and build cars. I actually did this with my students. Every class that I had, I would do this to help them understand what critical theory is about. And I would ask them, how much did they think was a fair and a good price for me to pay as a labor wage for them to build cars for me? And I would get like a half a dozen of them and put them all in the front of the classroom. And this is what we would do. And they would tell me a fair price. I would let them go off and talk and figure out what was a fair price. And whichever one came in with the highest price, pardon me, I would tell them, okay, I'm going to pay all of you twice that. And I'm going to pay for your uniforms. You have to wear uniforms to work here. And you have to wear, steel toe shoes. You can't drop the engine on your foot. I'm going to provide you with all of that. You think that's fair? Yes. Well, no, that's not enough. I'm going to provide you with medical care, health coverage. If you get sick, you get to go to the doctor, and my company pays for the insurance policy that pays for your health care. Do you think that's fair now? Oh, that's great. No, that's not enough. I'm going to pay for all your family's health care as well. How about now? Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. Okay, so now you're a satisfied laborer? Yes. Perfect. That's what I need. Happy people to make my cars. All right, so now they build this first car. And I get this car, and I market the car, and I pay the people who are going to do the marketing. I give them the same kind of a deal. And I sell this car, and since it's one of a kind and hand built, I sell this car for $100,000. You don't get any part of that profit. All that $100,000 is for me. Because I already paid you, and you agreed to the rate that I was going to give you. And it comes nowhere close to me selling this one car for $100,000. And you've been building these cars all year long. And I've been selling these cars all year long. And so now I'm wealthy. Okay, so it's not about that it's bad to be wealthy or that it's noble to be poor. That's not the point of the lesson. The point of the lesson is that you don't own the outcome. I only own the outcome. You are subjected to what is called alienation of labor. You are disconnected from the product that you labored to make. All right. This can be problematic. If you look at some of the car rental companies, I think Hertz or Avis or somebody may have been one of them. There were some airlines where the workers bought the airline and they own their own airline that they fly and work for. They no longer have alienation from their product, from the product of their work. But when you have alienation from the product of your work, it leaves room for abuse. And so critical theory deals with the relationship between those who own the means of production and those who actually do the production. So critical race theory, then, I know this was a long answer, a long way around, but I needed you to try to have a more clear sense of what it is that I was trying to get at. Critical race theory is the theory of why does American law, the American legal system, work for some, but it's not disenfranchising, it's alienating others from the same protections under the same laws. The laws are not being equally applied. So that's a form of alienation. And we're supposedly a land where equality, they say the pledge every day in school about it. It's supposed to be social equality. It's not social equality. And from the standpoint of the law, we want to understand why. That's what critical race theory is. Now, there is a conservative activist by the name of Christopher Rufo. And you can Google him, Christopher Rufo, R-U-F-O. And you will find in his Wikipedia his own statement that he deliberately created confusion around what the title critical race theory means, so that when the average Joe and the average Jane hears the term critical race theory, it sounds like something horrible because they've been misled about what it actually means. So they think Black history means critical race theory. So therefore, let us not teach any Black history. And if you get caught talking about Black history or social injustice along racial lines, you're violating it because you're teaching CRT. That is not what they're teaching. CRT is only taught in law school and not even to everybody.
Wow, powerful question, because there are on quite a few conservative channels groups of mainly white people that are pushing back on critical race theory.
Mm-hmm.
And their fear is Johnny's coming out of school being told he's a racist, right?
Mm-hmm.
When he's little. Hazar, that was a powerful question. Now, I see on your Facebook, it's finally good to get into this, that you have, for lack of a better word, a mixture of diverse friends.
Oh, yes. I have
And-
friends in countries all over this world.
And I watch your post, and some of the most reactive people to your post are white women. And then the journalist in me will click on their page and kind of see what kind of person they are. And most of them tend to be very much free thinkers, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of white people are terrified. They think Black consciousness or Black love equals white hate.
Mm-hmm.
Could you clarify and maybe educate both Black and white people that that's not what it means?
Well, here's the thing. See, years ago, I want to say this is about maybe 1993, 94, I did a lecture on something called abundance consciousness versus poverty consciousness. And poverty consciousness comes out of a belief in and an investment in a zero-sum game, life as a zero-sum game. Zero-sum meaning there is an all, there is a nothing, and there are many points between. And if I get more, it necessarily means you now have less. That's a poverty consciousness. For me to see, and if you look, you'll see that poverty consciousness pervades every area of thinking for some people. If I love you more, somehow I have less now. If I am more, if I give you a greater benefit of the doubt, if I dialogue with you, somehow I'm giving up high ground. See, that's a zero-sum kind of way of thinking. That's a poverty consciousness that makes a person think that for the other fellow or the other lady to gain means I necessarily had to lose something. That's not how nature works. Just observe how nature works. Nature is so abundant. And if we find a way to align ourselves with that natural abundance, we don't lose. We never lose. There is so much in terms of natural prosperity that we can't use it all. We can destroy it, but our destruction of it comes out of a poverty consciousness.
Can I make one footnote? Manuel Martinez said something. I just want to clarify something, and I'll let you get back to that, please. Manuel Martinez says it does suck. He lost a brother. He's a veteran, So I wanted to clarify to him that your statement of rain or hamburger was not an intent to belittle, and me laughing was not an intent to belittle our soldiers or anybody that dies. It's just listening to a brother that's so scholarly, sharp, and then say that caught me off guard. So, Manuel, we mourn your loss, and anybody that's been in war that's lost. Sorry, sir. I just wanted to add that in there.
Oh no, that's an important point, and I'm glad that you said that, Brother Martinez. I'm glad that you made mention of it because it's important, and it demonstrates how easily we can lose sight of the impact of our words on other people's human experience. And of course, we meant no harm in what we said or in our reaction to it. But that doesn't mean that none was necessarily done. So I apologize. But I was being deliberately graphic because I was trying to convey the impact. What I was describing really was based on a movie that was written that was based on a book. I later went out and found that book and bought the book and put it in my library. The book and the movie was called The Razor's Edge. It was a 1946 black and white movie. It starred Tyrone Power. None of you are old enough to know who he was, I don't think, but he was really, he was like the Denzel Washington of his day, but he was a white guy. And that was his story. That whole thing that I recited about that was his story, the character's story, the lead character's story, in that it became about his need to know himself, to understand the meaning of his life, and what his journey became after he got out of the war. He wouldn't get a job, he wouldn't work. Everybody around him was going to work at the stock market. This was happening, that was happening. He was living through the Roaring '20s. It was wealth hand over fist being produced. It was like the Wolf of Wall Street was going on, and then the stock market crashed. But he had been using his time to study himself. So when I said something about the friend who got killed in the war, that was directly out of that story, and the impact that had on Larry, the character Larry. It shook him. It made him wonder why he's still here. What made his life worth saving when the other guy's life seemed to be so much more valuable? So that's where that was coming from. And if I conveyed it in a way that was ultimately hurtful for you or for anyone else, for that matter, who hasn't spoken up about it, then I offer my apologies.
He just responded with that. He said no offense was taken. The way he said, he was clarifying that he lost a brother, and I wanted to make sure. So he was saying we're good, but okay. Yeah, we sometimes we forget and we don't thank and honor our brothers and sisters enough that actually fought for the country, whether we believe the war was just or not. Because I personally don't believe the last 20 wars, well, at least 15 that we've been in, weren't just. And so the spin on that was the American politics. You think about George Bush when he was president, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden they're going after the wrong boogeyman that they created, right? So they were losing momentum. And so what they did, instead of saying support the war, support the troops, support the soldiers, because now they're putting a face on it. So I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina at the NC State game, and they do the Pledge of Allegiance, and God forbid you speak against the war, because now you're talking about my son.
Yes.
And that's where the trickery comes in.
Mm-hmm. Game.
It's game.
Yeah.
So the whole thing with, so I wanted to say that, and we got to get our brother on here, man. He reminds me, man, my brother reminds me, Martinez, as an Incan or Mayan warrior. How they're connected to Black folks, and people don't even understand. And you can probably speak on this next point. We were taught growing up, and I have my own opinion, that slavery, as taught in the schools in America, should be abolished in the school system, and children shouldn't learn that until high school. I have my own opinions on that, why. I talked about that on the other show, but we are now learning that a good portion, a good percentage of what we call black people in America are really indigenous to this land. Would you care to elaborate on that?
Oh, listen. Okay, now we can at least all agree that the origin of mankind on this planet was in Central Africa, and over time, over millennia of millennia, African people began to migrate out of the continent. One of the earliest migrations was was first northward along the eastern coast of a portion of Africa, and then across into Asia, and downward into India, across the northern portion of India. The first wave that went that route crossed the northern portion of India, and continued on across the water to Australia. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of this. It's the National Geographic Society created something called the Genographic Project, and it was headed by Dr. Spencer Wells. And he was looking at finding the oldest people in all the continents and regions of continents, trying to understand how humanity spread out, who went where, and where did they come from. The second wave went the same direction, but when they got to India, they went southward into the subcontinent. This is where you got the Dravidians from, and the Orissa people, who are darker than most of the black people I know. Those who made it to Australia, some of them then left Australia and traveled across the water to the southernmost tip of South America. If you think about the Aborigines, they are some of the darkest people, pigmentation-wise, highly melanated people, especially back then. And it's important to remember that the land masses were not quite as far apart in their time as what they are now. But they and Spencer Wells and his team were able to study this and see the plausibility. These people, the Aborigines, came from Australia to the southernmost tip of South America, down where it would be what is the country? I'm trying to. It's past Chile. I'm trying to. Is it Argentina? I can't remember the name of the country, but it's the farthest south one, and they began to migrate northward, and they migrated into North America as well as through South America. Much later, another exodus that left out of Africa continued northward and got into Central Asia. They did this and got stuck in the glacier, in the Ice Age. They were there for a long time. And because for many generations, that was the physical and social climate that they lived in, they necessarily adapted to that. And it changed some things about how they functioned, and even what values they held and how they held them. That group continued on in their migration across the toward the Bering Straits. They came down the Bering land bridge. It was a bridge of ice at that time, into North America from the north, and they began to migrate southward. That group wiped out most of those who they found. Not all, but most. And so when we think of the indigenous people nowadays, the vision that comes into our mind when we hear that term is, I don't know if you remember a show used to be called F Troop, and they had the Indians and Chief Wild Eagle. You know, Chief Wild Eagle was played by an Italian man named Frank DeCote.
Right, right. They'd paint their faces. Yeah, I remember.
Correct. And then they
yeah.
used to have, when I was a kid, they had this ad on TV, an advertisement about pollution, putting an end to pollution, and the crying Indian. And he was standing there at the river's edge, and all this pollution was all over the beach and all over the water and just garbage everywhere. And he turned and he was looking, and it just had one tear coming down his cheek. His name was Iron Eyes Cody. He was also Italian. The first Native Americans did not look like that. The first ones, they did not look like that. The Seminoles, the Yamasee, these people, I mean, if we had screen sharing on and I were to go back and show you some of the photographs and some of the artwork that was painted to depict those people,
Mm-hmm.
you would think you were looking at somebody from, you know,
Sudan.
It's okay. Let's talk about it. This is great.
Sudan.
Yes. But I was going to say, you would think you were looking at somebody from, but I was trying. The reason I stopped, because I don't know any of the main places where you guys are, where Black folk congregate. In New York, I could say somebody from Harlem or somebody from Bed-Stuy. That's what you would think you were looking at,
right?
Because you could see the features. There. I have one photograph of two Choctaw, two Choctaw men sitting side by side, and the caption is explaining something called extermination or elimination through reclassification, and it goes into a discussion of the 1924 Racial Integrity Act of the Commonwealth of Virginia, which is how they were able to eliminate on the birth certificates. It used to say Indian, and Dr. Plecker, I forget whether it's Walter Plecker or William Plecker, as the state registrar, instructed all of the registrars of the clerk to expunge that word off of those birth certificates and replace it with colored. Because they didn't want those people to be able to marry white women. And so they had to make them black to make it illegal for them. But they weren't part of the people who were classified as black originally. I have personal acquaintances who were actually born on the reservation and had their cards for their tribal affiliation. But if you looked at them and didn't know, you'd just think they were another black person.
With all due respect, when I look at the difference between my some people I know, their facial features and yours, you have the features of some of the natives I grew up around. Same complexion and everything, right? So
hair, nose,
everything,
bone structure,
everything.
Yes.
When I see your whole family, all your children, same thing. Can I play this commercial real fast if the quality is good enough? I think this is what you were talking about.
Go ahead. Yes, that's it. That's it. Wow. Now that man is Italian.
I can see that.
Iron Eyes Cody.
You are a master with names, brother. Let's just watch this on out. We could, yeah.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country.
He's more pale than I am.
And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it.
Wow.
See, so that became the face of Native America.
Isn't this amazing? StreamYard, you can throw a video in there when you want, give commentary. Brother, we might have to really, with respect to your time and the subject matter, we have to bring you back soon. Maybe we could do once a week thing and just call it your show. Um, is man, where'd the time go? I guess that's like life, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Can I give
Life.
you? Can I give you as politely as I can? Can I give you one last question?
Sure.
Man, I hate to even end it because I go for hours, but we're kind of on a limit on space on the StreamYard for right now. Can I give you one last question? And I got so many for you. And then after you answer that question, could you give your closing remarks? My question is, what would you hope that your legacy would be?
I hope that my legacy will be that the people who know me, however closely, however casually, would always be able to reflect on my life as one of always trying to relieve myself of the burden of ignorance. To never be satisfied that I know enough, and that for all of the learning that I may manage to do in my life, that I tried my best to use all of it to increase my own self-awareness with the aim of uncovering as much of my own personal flaws, my own personal weaknesses, my own journey of self-discovery, that I could more effectively improve upon my own self through the process of self-awareness and the work that I use that information and that knowledge and that self-awareness as tools upon myself as the stone that I'm trying to shape, and myself as the workman using the tools, and that then they might find greater inspiration for doing the same with their own life. I don't know that I could leave a better legacy than that, especially for my children and my grandchildren and my descendants, that they would remember me in such a way and try to do the same thing.
Wow, that was powerful. Is there any closing remarks you'd like to give after that, or was that it?
That's about it. I want to thank everybody who has given of their time to hear whatever I may have had to say along the way this evening. If they gave me a minute or if they gave the whole 2.25 hours, I'm grateful, deeply appreciative of the time that they spent listening to me ramble on about different things that I've learned along the way. I hope that I've added some value.
Wow, I'd say you've added a lot of value to me. What do you think, Muhammad? You want to give your closing remarks, brother?
First of all, brother, I'd like to thank you. You taught me more in 2 hours and 15 minutes than I learned in the killing fields.
Mm.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me and teaching me and furthering my little knowledge that I can put on the head of a pen and still have room. Thank you so much.
The honor and pleasure is all mine. And as I used to say to all of my classes, learning is a two-way street, and no teacher worth his or her salt fails to learn from their students. The students make a better teacher. They prepare that teacher to be even better for the next class. And so there's no one-way street when it comes to that. I'm learning about myself even as I'm sharing what I share.
Thank you.
I want to read a comment. It'll probably be very close to you, and it's actually by you. I see you got a copyright in 1993. On your page, it says, "If you want square work, you don't cut corners."
Mm.
Next time we get you on, That's what we're going to talk about. That's a whole show in itself.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank my co-host Azar Muhammad, who still doesn't understand the impact he's having on this show, and to all the viewers. He's so humble. He comes from a legacy of fighters and spiritual warriors. I'm thankful for him. The show wouldn't be possible without him. I thank the Most High for him. Brother Rashied, I'm a fan of your work. I'm a fan of who you are. I'm indebted for the children that you've produced that have been a great example in my life. You know, your children are amazing. I'm honored, man. I've been thinking about you for a long time and how we can bring your light to the forefront in our area. Of course, you're already well known in your area. I thank you for your time. I wish we can write you a big check. We're not there right now, so you have to take our love for a monetary in replacement of monetary gain. I just want to thank God the Most High for giving me a beautiful Umi, a beautiful mother who everything I do reflects back to my mother. She was a Christian woman, but she was more Muslim than 99% of the Muslims and sisters that I went to the mosque with. It is through the Umi, it's through my mother, that a poor little white child who didn't have much, who always got in trouble for school with speaking, that I've come to find out that maybe my gift is communication. I honor those that come before me. I love you, brothers. Thank you for all the people that watch. Thank you. We are now still on the gentle stage of this show. When we create our own YouTube, we will be able to cuss, fight, and do all that. But YouTube is like the new America. There are a few groups of people and subjects you cannot talk about. So in closing, I love you, brothers. It's been a pleasure. God bless. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.